We're going to take a look at the security reporting for the S3 applications that are delivered with the Kinsey Security Dashboard. There's a couple ways we do that. We have some basic security reporting, and we have what's called the security analyzer. So we'll look at both of those. I'm not going to cover every feature that we go into, but this slide pretty much details the type of functionality they're going to have in the application. So we'll go through what security classes, how they're defined, how a role is defined, how you see specific user access to any detailed object, that being a table, a form, a field level security. And some of the other capabilities in the product allow you to do things, filtering on your data. I'll show you how the grouping works. You can export this all to Excel or PDFs. You can create favorite reports and save them and have email notifications go out. We also do historical reporting, so we'll allow you to take a snapshot of your security at any point in time or have that scheduled for every month or every quarterly, and you'll be able to go back and run reports of what security looked like at any specific point in time to validate maybe what access a user had versus maybe what they have now. That comes into where we do comparison reports. So if you want to know how somebody's security has changed over time, maybe how a role was defined, how that was changed, or even a security class, what has with the makeup of a security class, what has changed there? Have rules changed on specific forms? So we'll show you how all that works. And then we'll do profile and server comparisons additionally, so that when you get into issues where you might have a test environment and a production environment, and you thought you were going through all your testing on some changes you made, rolled that out to production, but in fact what you find is that you're not getting the same behavior. We can compare the two and maybe tell you what's different. But really today what I want to focus on is just how you get some basic security class reports, role reports, user reports out of the system, and then kind of show you this security analyzer we built that resolves some of the issues when you're looking at security about really understanding what level of access a user is going to have. So let's start with first understanding the structure behind how security for the S3 applications is laid out. So I'll start over on the right, and this is on security classes. So a security class for Lawson really is a process that enables you to do certain functionality in the application. So you'll see examples here like AP processing, and the forms that I have assigned to that are limited for example purposes. So it's pretty typical to see, 100 or 200 forms attached to a specific process, or maybe if it's just a maintenance functionality, you might only get 10. So in this case, you'll see I have like AP processing, which is a function or a task you're going to do within Lawson. And to enter an invoice, you need AP 20.1, AP 20.2, 23, 20.4, among other things. There's a number of different forms that you use to do AP processing. But then also might have AP inquiry. So maybe I want to look at vendors, or I want to look at invoices. So maybe the similar forms are set up for inquiry only rules versus a full access. So there's a number of security classes. You'll have hundreds of them in your application that break down all the specific tasks that someone needs to do within the organization across, financial, HR, payroll, certainly purchasing, payables, inventory control. And then those can be grouped and assigned to a role. So in this case, you'll see my roles would be like entry clerk. So an entry clerk might need to do multiple things. They might need to enter an invoice, but we don't necessarily maybe want them to do vendor invoice, vendor maintenance. So we'll give them AP inquiry, which will allow them to look at vendors, but maybe not enter vendors. Now you also might have an AP manager. So an AP manager is a role that can maybe have potentially more functionality. So the entry clerk can do some processing, the manager can do much more. They can be able to do, maybe they can enter, go into AP maintenance, and they can actually enter vendors. And then we might also have some self-service roles. So you define roles, and you won't have as many roles as security classes just on the way that everything is assigned, but you'll probably have a couple hundred roles in the system where you might have hundreds of security classes. So we're trying to organize what I call the objects over on the right. So an object can be a form, a table, a program. So a program is like AP10 is a program, and AP10.1, .2, .3 are the specific forms or tokens assigned to the program. Then you also have your system code. So AP is a system code or a category in Lawson. So there's a lot of structure. There's a lot of different objects, and then there's tables. So like the vendor table, right? So Ven master is a table. We have to actually give permissions to that as well. So you have about 7,000 different forms in Lawson and many more when it comes down to full objects. And those all need to be organized into classes and then eventually into roles, and then any one user can be assigned one or multiple roles. So in this case, I have a user that has 3 roles. So security classes can be shared across multiple roles, and multiple roles can be shared up to one user. So you can kind of see if I make a change down in the last column at the object level and I change the rule on something, that can move through the model and impact a number of different people. Because if I have 10 people that have access to entry clerk and I make a change to the AP processing security class, 10 people are actually going to be impacted by that. Now we also look at things on multiple ways people can get to a form and try to tell you what Lawson is actually going to enable you to have. So if I were to look at this slide now and point out here that form AP10.1, this user actually has 2 ways of getting to it. So what Lawson will look at is the least restrictive access to that form. So in this case, under AP maintenance, I might look at AP10.1 and the rule could be all access, but under AP inquiry, access to that form could be inquiry only. So in this case, all access is going to win and that user is going to have full access to AP10.1. So we have to look at the number of different ways someone can get access to a form and be able to tell whoever looking at the reports what level of access are they actually going to have. And we do that with our security analyzer. So the basic security reporting I will show you shows you all the different ways somebody can get there, and you'll have to determine what level of access they have. In the analyzer, we'll do that for you. So let's jump over to look at what the security reporting looks like. So this is our dashboard for just the S3 product for security reporting. And you can see here, if I look at the first 3 columns, it's kind of what we would expect: users, roles, security classes. The other issues we'll point out, but probably won't go too deep into. So I want to show you really 3 or 4 queries here, and then you can use the application, kind of play with it as you need, to look at maybe how some of the other queries work. But the functionality I'm going to show you is going to be true for all the different reports you see on the screen. So let's start with security class and form. So that was the kind of those last 2 columns on the diagram that I showed. And I'm going to do it for the form, not all objects. So I'm not going to look at tables and I'm going to look at programs and system codes. I'm just going to look at forms. Now I can run this for every security class I have in the system, or I can create some selection criteria by saying I want to name the class. The class starts with, maybe all your AP classes start with AP, or I can go down to advanced and we'll build a list of all of your security classes that are in your system. And you can see I can scroll down here on the right, look at all the different classes. Now I have different ways of selecting these. I could come out here and let me type in part of a name. So I get AP maintenance, pulls out maintenance. If I just wanted to put AP, it's going to pull out a number of different classes that have the letters AP in them, either in the description or in the security class itself. So different ways I can actually filter down and look at the classes, maybe find the classes I'm looking for. I can also just hold down the control key and select the classes I might want to work with. So I can do those and I can add them on the right. Or I can do the shift key. I can hold this down, hit shift, hold it, and click again and add those. So different ways of selecting the criteria, or in this case, the security classes that I want to work with. I'll go ahead and tell it we're going to work with all. And I could have done the same with the forms here. I could have specified a form. Maybe you're just looking for AP 10.1 or HR 11.1. In this case, I'm going to say all, and I'm going to run this report. So this is going to tell me what is the makeup of my security classes in the application. And I see AM analysis, and I see the forms containing AM analysis. We'll give you the description as it's defined in security. Then out of Lawson, what we do is part of the setup of our application. We'll pull out the descriptions of those forms. We'll give you all the available function codes on the form, so you'll know if they can do an add, change, delete, whatever that might be, ACD. And then we'll tell you the current rule that's set. So it could be that a form is set to inquiry only. It could say all inquiries. The rule could be INP and specify specific function codes or the actions. It could even be conditional logic. And you see, if I stretch this out a little bit, you'll see down here there's conditional logic on this form. Now, in the application then, on all these reports, you'll be able to do grouping and sorting. So if I want to sort by the form, I can just click on the form ID, and it'll come back and say AC00.1 belongs to all these different security classes. I can sort on class or class description, do the same thing. We got some test data here. So I'm gonna do what's called grouping. So I'm gonna group this by class. I'm gonna drag the class up here. And now what it does, it shows me every class I have and how many forms are in each class. So if I look at like AC analysis here, there's 130 forms in AC analysis. I see some of those forms are set to inquiry only. Now the form has the ability to do add, change, delete, but for the AC analysis class, what I'm looking at here is some conditional logic, some all access. I actually see the level of rule that's assigned to each one of these forms for the AC analysis grouping. Now, I also, though, may want to look at some critical forms and what classes they belong to. So instead of grouping by class, and that's one way to analyze this, I can group it by form. So I'm going to drag form up here, and now I see the number of classes any one form is assigned to. So I'm going to go ahead and click on form, and I'll sort it by form. And I'm going to also filter on this form. So every one of our columns, you can filter on the data. So I had the ability to filter what I wanted to see, to pull in and work with. And then once I have the data set I want to work with and view, I can change the criteria here of really what do I want to filter down to. So maybe I want to just look at AP10, contains AP10. So I could have put starts with AP10, is equal to AP10. I'm going to put starts with AP10, which is the vendor maintenance. And I see I get a number of AP10s, and I get the AP100s because they start with AP10. So now I see AP10.1 belongs to 4 security classes. And those classes here are VSS, which is probably some kind of vendor self-service or something, and then controller, AP maintenance, and then an inquiry. And out to the right, I can see it's set to all access, no access, the actual function code, whatever the rule might be. I'm going to be able to see how this form is assigned to this security class. Now in all of our reports that are going to be on the screen, you'll have the ability to drill up. So if you think back to the model that I showed, how we had the different layers of role security class, if I wanted to then know, well, this controller belongs to what roles? So I'm actually going up the schematic here, and it's LDAP is how this is stored. So I'm going up the LDAP tree to see how the structure is built. I can see controller is assigned to one role, which is financial supervisor. And you notice on the top of the screen here, what I did is I opened another page in my browser, so I can still go back to where I was. And if I want to know where financial supervisor, who has that role, I can drill up to financial supervisor and pick all the users that have that role. And I have one, H. Rogers. Okay, good. So I'll go ahead and close these out. Now I could also drill back down. So when I was at F. Rogers, I could have gone down the structure and seen everything F. Rogers has access to. But for these purposes, I just want to show this is how we can see the makeup of a security class and the form rules and all the different classes a form belongs to. So those are going to be pre-built in your application. There's a number of other things over here when I start getting into what the tables are, what the element groups are. I can look at what programs, all the different objects. So there's about 10 or 12 different types of objects, and you can look at those too. But most people are going to be concerned about what's assigned at the form level, what forms can users get into, or screens. So then let's go back and look at, what if I looked at this at the role level? So I want to look at, maybe there's a role that you want to assign to a user, and you want to know what's in that role. Well, like I could on the other filters now, I can go advanced. I could just pick the role or the 2 roles that I want to work with and say, I want to know what's in these 2 roles. I'm going to go ahead and add those, and I'll run this report. So I want all classes, I want all the forms, and it's going to just pull in that data for me to work with of what's in these 2 particular roles. And if I'm going to drag that up here. Now there's a couple ways of doing this. I could do a drop down here and say just group by this column, or I can just drag it up here. So now these are the 2 that I picked. I see AC data entry has 131 forms in it. So that could be a combination of different security classes. So I'm going to nest up my grouping. I'm going to drag security class up here. So now AC data entry has 2 security classes. AC expert has 15. So if I look at what data entry has, it has AC analysis and this balance reporting. And an AC expert actually has 15 different security classes.
Now, I've got the same count record out here. For now, it's going to be based on the number of forms. So AC Analysis has 130 forms. Here could be my 130 forms, my available function codes, and the rule that's set. So now, not only am I looking at the definition of a security class, but I'm looking at what on a couple of roles that might be assigned to a user on how that role is built. And that's a lot of times when I want to do a role review of if I assign this role to a user, what access are they going to have? This will give me that. Now, what you got to be careful of is that a user may have another role already that has some of these forms in it that may conflict. So now you have this overlapping, kind of like I showed in the diagram, where they might have the ability to get to a vendor maintenance as an inquiry user, and they also have all access through another form or through another security class. So I maybe want to see that as well. But if I want to analyze what's in a role or the makeup of a role, possibly before you would assign it to someone, this is a way you can do it, and you can look at all the detail. If you just wanted to know the security classes, there is a simple role security class that won't go into all the detail of every form, but I can run this for all my roles. Again, I can group this up, and I can look at AC Asset Clerk has 6 security classes. Then if you wanted to know what's in any one of these security classes, from anything that's blue, you'll be able to drill into. So maybe I can see all the objects, or I can see the forms. So if I want to know what's in AM Setup, it'll open up a browser sheet. I now see all the forms that are attached to AM Setup. This is only going to be that class. Up in the right hand corner, you're always going to have the number of records we found. And I can sort this either by the description, I can sort it by the form name, whatever you might want. So I'm going to close and back out of this. And so I'm seeing just now a simple role security class report. So there's a lot of these queries that are very similar. We even have these matrix reports that will lay this out kind of at a 30,000 foot overview. So you don't have to look at all the detail. Maybe you just want to know, as a grid basis, what's assigned to a role. And you can export all these as you're seeing them to Excel. So on these matrix, and there's 5 different matrix reports out here that you can run as you have time. And you'll see on the left, I have the role, and across the different columns, I have the security classes. So I can see all the different classes that might be assigned to a role. So here's that AC expert. I can see all these different classes. And you can sort by these. If you're concerned about a certain class or want to know how it's used, I can go to AC setup. I can sort in ascending and descending order. And I get the X's roll to the top, and I see the 5 classes that AC setup belongs to. From here, you can also drill to these. So if I were to drill to, let's see, AC accountant, I can either drill on the role information, so AC accountant on the left-hand side on column A, and I can say, show me all the users that have that role. Or I may want to look at all the different security classes in more detailed format than looking at them in a grid. Or I can look at the information behind what's in AC setup. So a couple ways you can drill here. But I can click on any column header. Again, I can sort it by role by clicking on the role column. And we'll just paint a grid for you. You're going to have those types of grids for, I think it was right here, for the security class, all objects. So that would be, all your tables, all your forms, all your programs. This is the one by role security class. You get another one by user role. So if you just want to know at a user level, what are my role assignments? And again, I could have filtered down to only some roles. Only some users. But I come down here now and I see all my users, and I get across the board, I get the role assignments. So it's just one way of looking at this data. Now at the user level, you may want to do this by looking at the user group security class form. So this is the report that probably most of our customers will use, because at a user level, it tells us what level of form access they have. You see a lot of other things on here. So if you don't get into identities and you don't get into attributes much, if you're a reviewer and what you're really concerned about are what level of access do they have to what forms. There's a couple things, by the way, you can do here. You can, I think it's over here on my favorites already. Let me remove this from favorites. On any one of these, if you just right click and say add to favorites, once you know what report you want, you'll build your own favorite menu here over on the right hand side. So if I look at user role security class form, again, I have all these ways of actually saying what data do I want to view. Maybe there's a handful of users that you need to review, so you're just going to put those users on this report. I'll go ahead and say all roles, classes, and forms, and we'll just pull everything in. Now, in your environment, if you have thousands of users, I think we pull in 1 million records on this grid. So it could be that you would exceed that, and we'll give you a warning about that. So you may want to filter that down to fewer roles, or sorry, fewer users, and that may help you get a report that's more manageable. But in this case, I only have 14,000 records. So I'm going to go ahead and sort it by user. I'm going to group it by user. And I'm going to layer this up. So actually, maybe what I'd rather do is use the name. Let me group it by user name. And then, try this again. User name. Okay. Sort it by name. Okay. And I'm going to group it by role. And I'm going to go by, and you can do descriptions or the IDs, whatever you like. And so now I see, Angie Davis has 6 roles. Those 6 roles are listed here. AC Accountant has 9 security classes, so the number indicates whatever the next grouping is. And then I can see that of her 9 classes, I got AC Data Entry has 45 forms, and here's the 45 forms. Now, up in the right corner, you can always throw this out to a printer. You can throw it to Excel. From Excel, you can create a PDF, right? So that's all exportable, and it exports it in up to 3 different layers of grouping. So it's going to go by user role security class and maintain this grouping. I could have just sorted it by user and exported it out, and you can do all that sorting in Excel also, but we will maintain these layers. So you'll see this is AC Data Entry has a lot of forms that are set to inquiry only, and if I scroll down, you'll see some have all access, some have inquiry. Right? But I get the level of access that's there. A couple little things you can do here if there's columns of information that are redundant, so sometimes the role descriptions are the exact same as the role, you can go to show hide columns here, and you can say I don't really need the role descriptions, I don't need the class descriptions, right? And you'll have the ability to kind of make this more concise, so you don't have to see some redundant information. You might have also seen on here that I'm intentionally hiding inheritance and role overrides, but you can enable them. So if you're using inheritance policies or you have role override policies, those will show up on these reports. You'd have to really talk to your security administrator on whether or not that's in use. So simple way to go in here and just say, here's the users I want to look at. I can always change my search criteria here on the top right by showing search. Now I could come down and say, I do want advanced, and I really only care about these users right here. Let's just pick 4 of them. I'm going to add them in, run the report. So by example, let's say those are our finance users. Okay, great. So I got 4 people in the finance department. These are the 4. I have a report I like. I want to save this report. So I'm going to go up in the right-hand corner, click on Save Report. I'm going to call it Finance Users. That's the name of the report. I won't give it a description here. I'll just go ahead and save this report. So this is the way I can look at the full access on users. So let me close this out. So again, I'm not going to go through all of the different options here. It's just different information within Lawson, identities and its attributes and its user groups. That kind of goes back to, if I went back to the diagram here, down on the left-hand side, you see I have to a user, we'll assign different attributes and we'll assign different identities on how they get into self-service, what their employee IDs are. You can get all that information out. It's just that information is not based on roles. Now, roles, in fact, are attributes. So when you run the user attribute report, you're going to get all their role assignments if you're just looking for just what the user role is, but you're also going to get their groups, can they get into add-ins, that type of information. Those are attributes. And you can run that attribute matrix here or just a regular attribute report that runs in more the row format than the column format. So that's really the core of what I want to show you in how to run these security reports. Again, the information at the bottom has to do more with some system information, some user activity. Unlinked objects are kind of orphans out there, so you have a role that's not assigned to a user. Somebody built a role, never assigned it to anybody. Somebody built a security class, never assigned it to a role. Or you have a certain object out there. You have forms that are out in your system that aren't tied to any security class. So people want to know kind of what that is laying around the model. What forms do we have that nobody can get access to? That's really down here as unassigned objects. You can get all that. But here's users who don't have any roles. Here's security classes that aren't assigned to any role, that kind of thing. So then I'm going to go back to, let's go back to the home page. And what I want to show you here is the security analyzer. So this is where we actually do a couple things to help you determine what level of security a user is going to have. And it really serves kind of a nice function for auditors also. There's things they want you to be able to control that somebody can't go in here and necessarily say, okay, this is an audit report for these 5 users, and they really don't want you to have the ability to filter any roles or security classes or any objects out of that report. So on our other test reports where I just showed you, I had this ability on every one of these reports to select maybe all users, but I could have pre-selected just some roles. So generally auditors are not comfortable that this is everything assigned to the user because you had this control over filtering. We don't allow that here. We'll allow you to pick the users that you want on the report, but you cannot control what information shows. We're going to give you everything about that user, and we also give this ability to export it straight to PDF and Excel, but in many of our accounts, the auditors want something that cannot be manipulated before they get it. So they don't want it just in Excel. The concern is you might have changed in the Excel, you might have made it look like they have a different level of security than they really have. So if you provide them both the PDF and the Excel version, there's a comfort level of knowing they have a validation method to say, okay, you didn't change what's in Excel. But in fact, it's easier to work with reporting in the Excel format. So I'm going to go ahead and select a profile. And there's a couple ways that I can select what users I want on this report, and I can save those as predefined reports. So I go up to the upper right-hand corner, and I'm going to create a new report. So one way to select the users is to simply, I'm going to uncheck the user box here, and I'm going to say I want these 3 users on my report. Right? And I'm going to say that's my 3 user report, whatever you want to call it. Maybe those are HR users, maybe they're finance users, give it a description. I'm going to save that report, and up here I get the 3 user report. So that's now static. If that was for a department and you added somebody new to your department, you'd have to come in, you'd have to modify this report, you'd have to come over here and call it, add the 4th user, save it, and that would have been a lousy report name, but you get the idea, right? So I have to maintain what users I have on the report. The other way to do this is for us to determine what users should be on this report based on some role assignments. So what I can do is I add a new report. Maybe I have one for asset management or something. So I'm going to unclick roles and I'm going to say anybody that has the AC accountant role and the AC asset clerk role, I want them, not have to have both, they have to have either one, I want on this report. Or if they have the AC manager role. So my list isn't building here, but at some point I could continue to add, there I added a user. So now every time I run this report, we're going to call this the AC user report. So now anytime I have a user that has any one of those 4 roles assigned to them, and this could happen, on any day, user role assignments, new hires, you assign roles to them. Current hires, you change the role makeups. My list on the right over here, every time I run this report, will change dynamically based on the fact they have one of these 4 roles. So you don't have to maintain this list on the right. So I now have an AC user report. So let's go ahead and run, I don't know what I'm going to get here. Actually, why don't I come down and run one, I'll call the financial users because I think I have more data there. And I'm just going to go ahead and run this. You'll see I have the option to run it either way, so our customers run it both ways. And then they provide both those reports to their auditors. So the difference here is, I have this ability to work in Excel, which is a little different, and we line your users up side by side. So you can easily go down to critical forms and go across the sheet and do comparisons. So let me go ahead and enable this here. And I'm going to scroll this up. Now you'll see, here's my users here, right here in my 4 columns, and above it I have the roles that they currently have assigned to them. The role with the asterisk is showing because that was one of my selection criteria. So this user actually had 2 of the roles that are in my criteria. This user has 1, this has 1, this has 1, right? So that's just a way for us to show you what roles are assigned to these users. Now I'm down here at the bottom, I'm in my categories. So you see A, C, A, D, different categories. I'm going to come across to the right, and I'm going to say really what I want to look at are tokens. So TKN, tokens, are forms. So you'll see we have a lot of different ways you can analyze security. I'm going to look at forms or tokens here. And again, I see the list of users, and I see the roles above them. We give that to you on every sheet. So now I'm just in Excel. So I can do things, I can do your regular, I can freeze panes here. if I knew how to do that. It's probably under View, Freeze Panes, okay? And I can add filters to this, whatever I want to do. I froze the wrong column, but you understand. So I'm going to go and scroll this, and I can go down and I can look at what form I want to look at their access, go across the page. I can see the available function codes in that form in column F, and then I see all access, all access, all access, inquiry for this user, inquiry for this user. So what I could do here, make this easier. Let me go back here and freeze this one. And now I can keep my users here, and I can scroll down, and I can see the level of access. So what we wanted to do here is show you how we resolve those conflicts. So I have a situation here where maybe I have all access on AC00.1. Out to the left, I have a plus. So you'll notice I have a role and security class column here. So if I expand this, I can see all the roles and security classes that for any one of these 4 users is their path to getting to this form. So you see A Davis actually has 3 of everything listed here of AC00.1. They have all access through AC setup. They have inquiry through AC data entry, and they have inquiry next and previous through AC analysis. All 3 of those are assigned to the same role. So some redundancy there, but okay. Well, what's going to win for Lawson is all access. That's less secure, right? So it's it's the least restrictive access. So all access wins. And I come over to this user and I see they have different ways of getting it through inquiry, different ways of getting it through all. So again, for this B Thomas, all access is going to win. And when I come on to the right, I have all access in most of these cases. And here's S. Miller. She only has one way of getting there, and that's INP. And that comes back through, it's just inquiry next previous, through AC analysis, AC data entry. Okay. So I can see the different ways that a user has access to this form. But again, we'll resolve this like Lawson would and put it up here on the first line for you. So hopefully when you're reviewing this, or whoever is reviewing it, can just look at this really level of access set for this and just know that that is in fact what Lawson is going to give them. If you have conditional logic, then we'll put condition in here. You can highlight over it. You can see what the condition is. But someone would have to explain that to a non-security person. What does that conditional logic do? Right? That's nothing we can really resolve. One of the issues with that is that when you're running these security reports, you're not necessarily logged into any Lawson company. So if this was a cross Lawson conditional logic that said, if you're in company 1, you can do these functions, but if you're in company 2, you can only do the inverse of those. So maybe company 1 you can do vendor maintenance and not invoice entry, but in company 2 you can invoice entry and not vendor maintenance. Well, I'm not logged into any Lawson company here, so I can't determine what level of access you're going to have until you actually would access that information. Nor do we actually go in and look at any Lawson data. So if it's based on a department ID or a process level, we're not pulling that information out of Lawson to know how to resolve or tell you what that conflict or that conditional logic is going to do. So all we can really do is show you the logic, and then you can determine from there what it does. We actually, even down at the bottom here, have a token condition. So this is all the conditional logic that's assigned in our demo system. I know what user it's for. I can tell you the cell reference back on the prior sheet, the objects it's on. But again, you'd have to look at this and say, okay, what does that conditional logic actually do? So this report does a couple things, right? So it resolves those, the level of access for you. It allows you to go straight to PDF. It prevents you from filtering out any kind of information or any roles about, or really any objects about a particular user. Now, the last thing here I want to show you is why this is orange. So if you're using securable types, and what securable types are is they allow your security admins to build a level of security for a user that overrides any other user that's set at the form level. So in this case of A. Davis, they've set a securable type on forms, and you can do it on form programs and tables. So on forms, I have a securable type set to all access. Now, I can't get in there, but you see AC accountant. Now, when you set a securable type form to all access, it just has to be attached to any security class. It isn't necessarily just for that security class. So what this is telling me is that A. Davis has all access to every form that they have access to. So it still goes back to what roles they're assigned and what security classes they're assigned, but it doesn't have anything to do with the level of access that's set for them. So in this case, this form right here, AC, what is that, AC 00.3, this user would have inquiry generally, but because they have a securable type of all access, this I doesn't matter. They're going to get all access. Same thing here. This AC02.1, they're going to have full access. So we highlight this in orange so that whoever is reviewing this report understands that that's a complete override for every form they actually currently have access to. Now, if I look at these forms, this user does not have access to these forms, so they're still not going to have access. So it doesn't override the fact that you have no access to all access, only overrides the function code level that you have and basically makes everything all access for those forms that are assigned to you. But you can, again, look at this, look at your element groups, fields, field conditions, programs, tabs, reports. There's all kinds of data. But most people focus back here on token, which token and form is a synonymous term. So your screen, what you might call a screen, what you might call a form to Lawson is called a token. So those are one and the same. But that's really it when you get back to Security Analyzer. You can save these reports. These do not get scheduled, but you can run these on demand whenever you want, build them out what users you want to see, and we'll actually give you the level of access they're going to have. So that's really what we wanted to cover here. So I went through security reporting, Security Analyzer, some of these other tools we'll get to another time, but hopefully that'll help you as you go through and start using the applications.